The mahogany doors of the Evergreen Heights Country Club loomed before me, their polished surface reflecting the late afternoon sun. I straightened my jacket, not designer, but the best I could afford, and pushed them open with a confidence I didn't entirely feel. The foyer smelled of old money and privilege, leather-bound books, expensive cologne, and the faint aroma of single malt whiskey. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings, casting a warm glow over oil paintings of past club presidents and pristine landscapes of the golf course that had once been my sanctuary. As I approached the administration office, memories flooded back. 20 years ago, I had walked these same halls as a caddy, learning every contour of the greens, every bunker and water hazard. I had been invisible then, a ghost in white overalls, carrying bags for men who made more in an hour than I made in a month. But I had loved the game, studied it, breathed it, dreamed of one day walking these fairways as a member. The club administrator, Miranda Phillips, looked up from her computer with practiced disinterest. She was in her 50s, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, her face a masterpiece of cosmetic preservation. "Ms. Chun will see you now," she said, not bothering to disguise the skepticism in her voice. Jessica Chun, the club president, sat behind an imposing desk of darkwood. Floor-to-ceiling windows behind her offered a panoramic view of the 18th hole, where members in pastel polo shirts were finishing their rounds. She didn't stand when I entered, nor did she offer her hand. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, my application folder open before her. "Please have a seat." I sat down, conscious of the contrast between my department store suit and her tailored Armani ensemble. "We reviewed your application," she continued, her manicured fingers resting lightly on the folder. "While we appreciate your enthusiasm for our club, I'm afraid Evergreen Heights maintains certain standards for membership." "My financials are all in order," I said, keeping my voice level. "And I've been playing golf since I was 12. A polite smile formed on her lips, never reaching her eyes. "It's not just about financial capability or golfing experience, Mr. Sullivan. Evergreen Heights is a community. Our membership committee carefully evaluates how potential members might fit in with our existing community." Behind her, I could see a group of men on the terrace, raising crystal tumblers in laughter. I recognized Hamilton Brooks among them, the real estate mogul whose foreclosure practices had cost my parents their home during the 2008 crisis. "This club is for elite members only," Jessica continued with that same practice smile. "Perhaps the public courses would be more suitable for someone of your background." The words hung in the air between us, their meaning clear. It wasn't my bank account they objected to, though that certainly wasn't helping. It was where I came from, who I was. The invisible caddy boy, the scholarship kid, the son of immigrants who had dared to climb too high. I smiled and stood, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me wounded. "Thank you for your time, Ms. Chun." As I turned to leave, she stopped me. "The application fee is non-refundable, of course." "Of course," I replied, not turning back. Walking through the clubhouse, I passed the wall of champions, photographs of tournament winners throughout the decades. There, in a dusty frame from 2001, was a teenage version of myself, not as a member, but as a caddy, standing in the background while Jonathan Harrington foreheld aloft the club championship trophy. I had calculated the win that day, suggested the 7-iron instead of the 8 on the 16th hole, guided him to victory. My name appeared nowhere. I exited silently, the heavy doors closing behind me with a definitive thud. Standing in the parking lot, I looked back at the sprawling clubhouse, the meticulously maintained greens, the row of luxury cars gleaming in the fading light. What they didn't know, as they sipped their aged scotch and laughed at applicants like me, was that things were about to change. Drastically. I hadn't come here today expecting acceptance. I'd come to see their faces one last time before I revealed my hand. Tomorrow morning, when the foreign investment announcement hit the news, when they learned that I had purchased their $100 million mortgage through my company's Shell Corporation in Singapore, when they realized who now controlled the fate of their precious sanctuary, then they would know. Then they would understand that the invisible caddy boy had been watching, learning, planning, and now finally returning. I got into my modest sedan, The one I drove when I wanted to fly under the radar, not the Maserati parked in my garage, and dialed my attorney. "It's done," I said. They rejected the application, just as expected. Proceed with Phase 2. What prejudices have you encountered in spaces where you felt you didn't belong? Have you ever been underestimated by someone who later regretted it? Share your experiences in the comments below. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of my downtown penthouse as I sipped espresso and watched financial news scroll across multiple screens. My real home, the place where I built my empire, where I plotted and planned, where I became the man I am today. 20 years is a long time to nurture a dream of justice. Some might call it revenge, but I prefer to think of it as correction, a balancing of scales that had been unfairly tipped for generations. After being rejected from college scholarships despite perfect grades, after watching my parents lose everything while the Brookses and Harringtons of the world received government bailouts for their companies, after being passed over for promotions in favor of less qualified men with the right connections, I had learned to play the long game. I set down my cup and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. From this height, I could see Evergreen Heights Country Club in the distance, its emerald expanse a stark contrast to the urban landscape. A private kingdom of privilege, about to experience an unexpected regime change. My journey from caddy to financial powerhouse hadn't been straightforward. After community college, I had worked 3 jobs to put myself through state university, then clawed my way into an entry-level position at an investment firm. While others spent weekends partying on yachts, I studied market patterns, identified undervalued assets in emerging markets, anticipated trends before they emerged. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, I was ready. While titans tumbled, I made strategic moves that positioned my small portfolio for exponential growth. I started my own firm in 2010, focused on sustainable investments in Asian markets. I lived modestly, reinvested profits, and built a reputation for integrity and uncanny market instincts. By 2015, Sullivan Global was managing billions. By 2020, we had offices in Singapore, Dubai, and London. I accumulated wealth quietly, kept my name out of the press, operated through a labyrinth of subsidiaries and holding companies, all while keeping my eye on Evergreen Heights. The club had fallen on hard times during the pandemic. Membership had dwindled as younger generations showed less interest in golf. The property needed updates they couldn't afford. In 2022, they had taken out a $100 million mortgage to renovate the clubhouse, modernize facilities, and stay competitive with newer country clubs cropping up in neighboring counties. That mortgage had changed hands 3 times since then, bundled with other commercial loans, sliced and repackaged by financial institutions that never bothered to look closely at the borrowers. 3 weeks ago, through a Singapore-based corporation that couldn't be traced back to me, I had purchased the entire bundle, primarily for that one particular loan. My phone rang, breaking my reverie. It was Aisha, my chief financial officer, and the only person besides my attorney who knew what I was planning. "Morning, boss," she said. "The announcement is scheduled for 9 a.m. Eastern. Markets open in 30 minutes. Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything," I replied, watching a gardener tend to flowers on the club's perimeter in the distance. "They've made their choice. Now they'll live with it." "It's been 20 years, Michael," she said gently. "Is this really worth it? Was it worth it?" The question echoed in my mind as I recalled the devastation on my father's face when we lost our home, when his landscaping business collapsed because his wealthy clients, many of them Evergreen Heights members, suddenly couldn't pay their bills, but still maintained their club memberships. I remembered my mother working double shifts at the hospital, coming home with cracked hands and empty eyes. I remembered the scholarship committee at Evergreen Heights, headed by Hamilton Brooks himself, rejecting my application despite my perfect grades and golf scores, awarding it instead to Jonathan Harrington V., who barely maintained a C average. "Some debts can't be measured in dollars, Aisha," I said finally. "Make sure the press release goes out exactly as planned." I ended the call and turned to my closet, selecting a bespoke suit in charcoal gray. Today wasn't a day for blending in. Today, I would finally be seen. At precisely 9 a.m., as I was sliding into the back seat of my waiting car, the announcement hit the financial newswires. Singapore-based Meridian Holdings acquires controlling interest in Evergreen County properties, including the prestigious Evergreen Heights Country Club. Representatives announce plans for significant changes to membership structure and property usage. Within minutes, my phone began to vibrate with incoming calls. The club president, the board members, financial journalists seeking comments. I silenced them all as my driver pulled away from a curb. "Where to, sir?" he asked. "Evergreen Heights," I replied, feeling the weight of 2 decades of planning settling into certainty. It's time I took a look at my new property. Have you ever planned something for years before finally making your move? What made you wait, and how did it feel when the moment finally arrived? Tell your story in the comments section. By the time I arrived at Evergreen Heights, chaos had erupted. The parking lot was filled with luxury vehicles haphazardly parked, some with doors still open as their owners had rushed inside. Security guards looked uncertain, glancing at their phones where news alerts undoubtedly explained the source of the commotion. I straightened my tie and walked through the entrance without hesitation. No one stopped me. In the lobby, members and staff had gathered in clusters, voices raised in concern and confusion. I recognized faces from charity galas and business journals, the elite of the county, people who had never given me a second glance when I'd catered their events or valeted their cars during my college years. Jessica Chin stood in the center of the main hall, surrounded by board members, her composure visibly cracking as she spoke urgently into her phone. When she saw me, her expression transformed from anxiety to bewilderment. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm afraid this isn't a good time. We're dealing with an urgent situation." "I know exactly what situation you're dealing with," I replied calmly. "That's why I'm here." Her eyes narrowed. "I don't understand." "Meridian Holdings." I let the name hang in the air between us. "You've been trying to reach their representatives all morning, I imagine." Understanding dawned on her face, followed quickly by disbelief. "That's not possible." I reached into my pocket and retrieved a business card, not my usual Sullivan Global card, but one bearing the Meridian Holdings logo. "I believe your board has requested an emergency meeting with the new property owner. I'm here to accommodate that request." The room fell silent as word spread. Jessica's professional mask slipped completely, revealing naked panic beneath. "You? But yesterday you applied for membership. You can't possibly." "Yesterday's charade was simply to confirm what I already knew about this club and its leadership," I interrupted, keeping my voice level. "As for what's possible, I think you'll find the legal documentation in order. My attorneys have already forwarded everything to your legal team." Hamilton Brooks pushed his way through the crowd, his face flushed with anger or perhaps too many morning cocktails. "Sullivan? The caddy boy? This is absurd." I turned to face him, 20 years of suppressed emotion carefully contained. "Mr. Brooks, it's been a long time. How's the real estate business? Still foreclosing on hard-working families while maintaining your club membership?" He sputtered, but before he could respond, Jonathan Harrington IV approached, his son, the scholarship recipient who had taken my place at Princeton, trailing behind him. "Let's all calm down," the elder Harrington said, ever the diplomat. "I'm sure we can come to some arrangement, Mr. Sullivan. Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss in private that can't be said here," I replied. "Transparency will be a cornerstone of the new Evergreen Heights." A murmur ran through the crowd. "New Evergreen Heights?" Jessica repeated. "Yes. Effective immediately, I'll be implementing several changes." I glanced around the room, meeting the gaze of people who had overlooked me, underestimated me, dismissed me for decades. First, membership fees will be redistributed on a sliding scale based on income. Those with more will pay more, subsidizing access for those with less. Second, the scholarship program will be expanded and awarded based solely on merit, administered by an independent committee. Third, a portion of the property will be converted into a public golf academy for underprivileged youth. The outrage was immediate and vocal. Board members protested that I couldn't make these changes, that bylaws protected the club's exclusivity, that traditions had to be maintained. I held up a hand, silencing them with a gesture that conveyed more authority than they had expected from me. I'm not finished. The mortgage terms give me significant control over property decisions. You can, of course, challenge these changes, but the legal battle would be lengthy and expensive. During that time, I would be forced to close the club entirely for renovations. It was a bluff, but a calculated one. These people valued convenience and status above all else. The prospect of being without their sanctuary for months, perhaps years, while dealing with public scrutiny of their exclusionary practices would be unthinkable. Or, I continued into the strained silence, you can embrace these changes as evidence of your community leadership and progressive values. The press release announcing your enthusiastic support is ready to go out this afternoon. Your choice. Jessica's professional smile had vanished completely. You can't honestly expect us to believe this is about community good. This is revenge. I met her gaze steadily. This is justice. Something that has been in short supply at Evergreen Heights. As I turned to leave, Hamilton Brooks blocked my path, his face mottled with rage. You won't get away with this. Do you know who we are? Who our lawyers are? I smiled, genuinely amused by his impotent fury. I know exactly who you are, Mr. Brooks. I've been caddying for men like you my entire life, carrying your burdens, cleaning up your messes, making you look better than you are. The difference is, now you'll have to pay me properly for the privilege. The shock on his face was worth every minute of the 20-year wait. The board will convene at 3 p.m., I announced to the room. I expect your decision by then. My attorneys will be present. I handed Jessica a folder containing the legal documentation of my ownership. You might want to review this before the meeting. As I walked out through the main entrance, the morning sun warm on my face, a profound sense of vindication washed over me. Not just for myself, but for my parents, for all the invisible people who made places like this function while being treated as less than human. My phone buzzed with a text from Aisha. It's all over the financial news. Stock in adjacent properties already dropping. You've started an earthquake. I typed back a simple reply. Good. Some things need to fall before they can be rebuilt properly. Have you ever planned something for years before finally making your move? What made you wait, and how did it feel when the moment finally arrived? Tell your story in the comments section. As I left the clubhouse, a voice called out behind me, Mr. Sullivan, wait please. I turned to find an elegant woman in her 60s hurrying down the steps. Diana Harrington, Jonathan Ivy's wife, and a formidable presence in county social circles. I braced myself for another confrontation. Mrs. Harrington, I acknowledged with a slight nod. She caught up to me, slightly out of breath. Up close, I could see the fine lines that her carefully applied makeup couldn't quite conceal, the slight tremor in her manicured hands. What you're doing, she said, looking around to ensure we weren't overheard. I want you to know not everyone disagrees with it. I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. Diana Harrington had been club champion for 15 consecutive years, had chaired every major fundraiser, had personally vetted the social credentials of prospective members for decades. I remember you, she continued, from when Jonathan won the club championship in 2001. You weren't just his caddy, you were his coach that day. I hadn't expected this. I'm surprised you noticed. I noticed more than people think. She glanced back at the clubhouse, where her husband could be seen through the windows, gesticulating angrily to fellow board members. This club, it wasn't always like this. When my father was president in the 1960s, it was about the love of the game, about community. I remained silent, unsure where this was heading. After my father died, things changed. The new money came in the Brookses, the Chens, people who cared more about exclusivity than the sport. She smoothed her linen blazer with a practiced gesture. I've watched this place become something my father would despise. With all due respect, Mrs. Harrington, you've been at the center of that transformation. You've rejected countless applications from qualified candidates who didn't fit the preferred profile. Pain flickered across her face. Yes, she admitted. I have many regrets, Mr. Sullivan. When you get to my age, regrets accumulate like unpaid debts. A club employee approached us tentatively. Mrs. Harrington, Mr. Brooks is asking for you inside. Tell him I'll be there shortly, she replied without looking at him. When he'd gone, she turned back to me. I want to help you. Help me. I couldn't hide my surprise. What you're proposing? Opening the club to merit-based membership, creating programs for underprivileged youth. My father tried to implement similar changes in the 1950s. He was outvoted, marginalized. Eventually, he stopped trying. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. Why would you help dismantle a system that has benefited you your entire life? She smiled sadly. I'm dying, Mr. Sullivan. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less. She held up a hand to forestall my condolences. When you face death, priorities become remarkably clear. Legacy matters. I don't want mine to be as guardian of exclusivity and prejudice. My mind raced, calculating the strategic value of having an insider ally, especially one as respected as Diana Harrington, against the possibility this was an elaborate ploy to undermine my position. What exactly are you offering? I asked. Information. The club bylaws have loopholes you can exploit. I know where the financial bodies are buried, which members are behind on dues, but allowed to stay because of their names, which renovations were done without permits, which tax deductions have been creatively applied. She glanced at her watch. I don't have much time now. They'll get suspicious. But I have documents, my father's original vision for the club, records I've kept over the years. Why not just present these issues to the board yourself? Her laugh was brittle. I've tried subtly, but I'm just Jonathan's wife to them, despite my family founding this place. Besides, they close ranks against internal criticism, but an outside force, a new owner with leverage, that they can't ignore. I considered her offer. Diana Harrington would have access to information that could take my attorneys months to uncover. She understood the social dynamics, the unwritten hierarchies that govern places like Evergreen Heights. How do I know I can trust you? I asked finally. She reached into her purse and withdrew a thumb drive. This contains financial records for the scholarship fund for the past 20 years, including the year you were rejected. Review it, then decide if you want my help. As she placed it in my hand, her fingers, cool and papery, lingered for a moment. Your parents, Carlos and May Sullivan, they were good people. Your father maintained our garden for years. Your mother cared for my mother in her final days at County General. They deserved better than what this community gave them. I stared at her, momentarily speechless. In all my research, all my planning, I had never considered Diana Harrington might remember my parents, let alone their names. The board meeting at 3, she continued, regaining her composure. They'll present a united front, offer concessions they have no intention of honoring. Hamilton will threaten legal action. Jessica will appeal to tradition and legacy. And your husband? Jonathan will suggest a compromise that appears reasonable, but preserves the status quo. She smiled faintly. He's been using the same playbook for 40 years. A car horn honked, my driver, reminding me of pending appointments. If you decide to accept my help, Diana said, meet me at the Anderson Art Gallery at noon. I volunteer there Thursdays. We can talk privately in the conservation room. She turned and walked back toward the clubhouse, transforming with each step from the vulnerable woman who had spoken to me into Diana Harrington, club matriarch, her spine straightening, her chin lifting as she prepared to rejoin her social circle. I watched her go, the thumb drive heavy in my palm. 20 years of planning, and still the day brought surprises. Perhaps there were more allies in unexpected places, people who had participated in unjust systems while harboring private doubts, waiting for a catalyst for change. Or perhaps it was an elaborate trap. As I slid into the back seat of my car, I connected the thumb drive to my secure tablet, prepared for disappointment. What I found instead was vindication, so complete it took my breath away. Have you ever found an ally in someone you expected to be an adversary? What unlikely alliances have formed in your life during times of conflict? Did they change your perspective? Share your experience in the comments. The Anderson Art Gallery occupied a converted Victorian mansion on the edge of downtown, its gardens meticulously maintained as a showcase for local sculptors. As I approached the ornate entrance at precisely noon, I found myself hyper-aware of my surroundings, scanning for any sign of a setup. The elderly docent at the reception desk brightened when I asked for Diana Harrington. "Oh, she's expecting you. In the conservation room, down the hall, last door on the left." Such a dedicated volunteer, our Diana. We don't know what we'd do without her. The conservation room was cool and dimly lit to protect the artworks being restored. Diana stood before an oil painting, carefully cleaning its surface with a cotton swab. She wore a smock over her clothing, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Without her careful makeup and social armor, she looked older, more fragile, but somehow more authentic. "You came," she said without turning around. "I wasn't entirely sure you would." The financial records were illuminating. I kept my voice neutral, though the contents of the thumb drive had left me seething. Documents showing that the scholarship committee had predetermined recipients years in advance. Children of members, regardless of merit. My perfect application had never stood a chance. "Yes." She set down her tools and faced me. "What happened to you wasn't unique, Mr. Sullivan. It's been happening for generations. Merit has always been secondary to connections." I moved closer to examine the painting she was working on, a landscape of Evergreen County from the early 1900s, showing rolling hills before development had transformed them into subdivisions and golf courses. "My father commissioned this," Diana said, following my gaze, "to remind members of what had been sacrificed to create their playground. Most walk past it without a second glance." She gestured to a small table where she had laid out folders yellowed with age. "These are the original club charter documents from 1925, when my grandfather founded Evergreen Heights." I opened the topmost folder carefully. Inside was a handwritten mission statement, its language strikingly different from the exclusionary policies of the modern club. To create a community united by the love of sport, where merit and character outweigh birthright and wealth. The club was originally created as an alternative to the explicitly segregated clubs downtown, Diana explained. "My grandfather was considered radical for allowing Jewish members, for inviting the occasional black golf pro to give demonstrations when such things were unheard of." What changed? After World War II, when my father took over, social pressures mounted. Wealthy families threatened to withdraw their memberships unless certain standards were maintained. She sighed. "My father resisted, but he was outvoted by the board." By the time I was coming of age in the 1970s, Evergreen Heights had become exactly the kind of exclusionary institution it was founded to oppose. She slid another folder toward me. "These are the current membership statistics. Note the demographics compared to our county population." The disparity was stark. Despite the county's diversity, club membership was over 90% white, with token representation from wealthy Asian families who had been in America for generations. Virtually no Black or Hispanic members, despite these groups making up nearly 40% of the county's population. "And this," she continued, producing another file, "is what should interest your attorneys the most." In 2010, to maintain their tax-exempt status as a recreational club, Evergreen Heights signed an agreement with the county promising increased community access and diversity initiatives. They received significant tax breaks in exchange, but never implemented the promised programs. I leafed through the documents, my mind calculating the legal leverage they provided. They committed tax fraud. Yes, among other things. She hesitated, then added, I was club secretary at the time. I signed some of those documents myself. I'm not innocent in this, Mr. Sullivan. Why expose this now? Why not years ago? She turned back to the painting, resuming her gentle cleaning. Fear, complacency, the comfort of belonging, all the usual human failings. Her hand trembled slightly. And then 3 months ago, I received my diagnosis. Suddenly, the future I had always assumed would unfold. Grandchildren growing up in the club, carrying on traditions, vanished. Instead, I found myself thinking about legacy in a different way, about making amends while I still can. She set down her tools again and met my gaze directly. The board meeting this afternoon. They've been strategizing all morning. Hamilton wants to fight you legally. Jessica wants to negotiate temporary concessions until they can find a way to force you out. My husband is advocating for offering you a membership as appeasement while making no substantial changes. And what do you advocate? Surrender. She smiled at my surprised expression. Complete surrender to your terms, followed by genuine reform from within. It's the only way to preserve what's worth preserving about Evergreen Heights while excising the rot. I studied her, still not entirely trusting her motives. You understand that what I'm proposing would fundamentally transform the club you've devoted your life to. What I've devoted my life to is already gone, she replied simply. Has been for decades. I'm merely suggesting we stop pretending otherwise. She gathered the documents into a leather portfolio and handed it to me. Everything you need is here: financial irregularities, unfulfilled diversity commitments, tax discrepancies. Use it as you see fit. As I took the portfolio, a question that had been nagging at me finally surfaced. The scholarship. The year I applied. Did you know what happened? Pain flickered across her face. I suspected. Jonathan came home that day unusually defensive about the committee's decision. Said they'd chosen the most qualified candidate with too much emphasis. She met my eyes directly. I didn't push. I should have. It's one of many moments I'd change if I could. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed, breaking the tension. 1 hour until the board meeting. Diana removed her smock, revealing a simple but elegant dress beneath. I've arranged to have the conference room prepared with refreshments. Old habits, she added with a self-deprecating smile. No matter the circumstances, proper hospitality must be observed. As we walked toward the exit, she stopped before a small watercolor tucked in an alcove. A simple garden scene, unremarkable compared to the gallery's more impressive works. Your father painted this, she said softly. Carlos took an art therapy class at the community center after his business failed. He gave me this as a thank you when I helped him get a job with the county parks department. She touched the frame gently. He had remarkable talent. In another life, with different opportunities. I stared at the painting, a side of my father I had never known. He had never mentioned painting, never spoken of Diana Harrington, except as a former landscaping client. I kept it, she continued. Had it properly framed. It reminds me that talent and worth exist everywhere, not just in the circles we artificially elevate. We walked in silence to our respective cars. As Diana was about to get into her Mercedes, she paused. Mr. Sullivan, Michael, may I ask what you ultimately plan to do with the club after you've made your point? I considered the question carefully. In truth, my planning had been focused on the takedown, the moment of justice, not the aftermath. I haven't decided, I admitted. Part of me wants to tear it all down, start fresh. Another part recognizes there's history worth preserving. Your grandfather's original vision, for instance. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with my honesty. Whatever you decide, I hope you'll consider that institutions can be reformed. That people, some people, can change when confronted with their failures. A faint smile touched her lips, though Hamilton Brooks may be beyond redemption. With that, she slid into her car and drove toward Evergreen Heights. I remained in the parking lot, examining the painting my father had created. The gentle brushstrokes capturing a garden in bloom, vibrant despite its simplicity. Another piece of him I had never known, another talent suppressed by circumstance and necessity. I texted Aisha, coming back with additional leverage. Prepare for total capitulation. Her response was immediate, already hearing rumblings. Brooks making calls to every lawyer in tri-state area. Chun trying to reach our investors. They're scrambling. Good. Let them scramble. Let them feel a fraction of the desperation my parents had felt. I slid into my car, the leather portfolio secure beside me, and directed my driver toward Evergreen Heights. 20 years of planning was culminating in ways I couldn't have anticipated, not in more resistance, but in unexpected alliances, in complexities that challenged my black and white view of justice. For the first time since embarking on this path, I allowed myself to consider a future beyond revenge, a future where Evergreen Heights became a symbol not of exclusion, but of transformation, of second chances. But first, there would be a reckoning. Have you ever discovered an unexpected side to someone in your life after they were gone? What treasures or talents did your loved ones keep hidden? Share your discoveries in the comments. I arrived at Evergreen Heights 15 minutes before the scheduled board meeting. This time, the valet took my keys with deference, the doorman held the entrance with a respectful nod, and the club manager himself escorted me to the boardroom. Word travels fast when power shifts. The boardroom occupied the top floor of the clubhouse, its windows offering panoramic views of the property. The undulating greens, the sparkling water hazards, the tennis courts where white-clad figures moved like chess pieces. A massive oak table dominated the center, surrounded by leather chairs bearing small brass plaques with members' names. Generations of the same families had occupied these seats, passing down privilege like heirlooms. I took a seat at the head of a table, the president's chair. Jessica Chen's nameplate gleamed beside the empty space. I left it there, a reminder of the change underway. My attorneys, a diverse team I had specifically selected for this moment, arranged themselves on either side of me. Aisha set up her laptop, quietly organizing our evidence and presentation. At precisely 3 p.m., the board members filed in. Hamilton Brooks, red-faced and scowling. Jonathan Harrington IV, his expression carefully neutral. Jessica Chun, her composure restored behind a mask of professional detachment. 8 others, banking executives, real estate developers, old money heirs, all regarding me with varying degrees of hostility and apprehension. Diana Harrington entered last, taking her customary seat beside her husband. She met my eyes briefly, her expression revealing nothing to the others present. "Mr. Sullivan," Jessica began, her voice cool and measured. "The board appreciates your prompt attendance. We're eager to discuss this unexpected development." "I imagine you are," I replied calmly. "Before we begin," Hamilton interjected, "I should inform you that we've consulted with our legal team. There are serious questions about the validity of Meridian Holdings' acquisition. The club bylaws specifically protect against hostile takeovers." One of my attorneys, Lena Washington, a formidable litigator who had grown up in the county's poorest neighborhood, smiled faintly. "The club bylaws apply to club governance, Mr. Brooks. They have no bearing on mortgage ownership or property rights. Perhaps you should have consulted real estate attorneys rather than corporate ones." Hamilton's face darkened further. "Who the hell are you?" Lena Washington, lead counsel for Meridian Holdings. Harvard Law, class of 2010. You might remember rejecting my scholarship application in 2006. I was not quite what the committee was looking for. A tense silence followed as Hamilton recognized another ghost from his past. Jessica Chun stepped in smoothly. "We're getting off track. Mr. Sullivan, we've prepared a counterproposal we believe addresses your concerns while preserving the essential character of Evergreen Heights." She slid folders across the table. Inside was a document outlining minor concessions, a modest increase in scholarship funding, relaxed dress code requirements, a handful of diversity initiatives without enforcement mechanisms. "This is insulting," I said quietly, closing the folder without reading beyond the first page. "Did you really think this would be sufficient?" "We're willing to negotiate," Jonathan Harrington offered reasonably. "And of course, we'd be pleased to extend a full membership to you, effective immediately. Your initiation fee would be waived as a gesture of goodwill." I couldn't help but laugh. "A membership? That's what you think this is about, isn't it?" Jessica asked. "Recognition? Acceptance? The chance to belong to an institution that once rejected you?" "You fundamentally misunderstand my motivation," I replied. "This isn't about gaining entry to your club. It's about transforming what this club represents." I nodded to Aisha, who distributed our own folders, containing Diana's documents along with additional research my team had compiled. "Before we proceed further," I continued, "I suggest you review these materials. Pay particular attention to the sections regarding tax compliance, unfulfilled diversity commitments to the county, and financial irregularities in the scholarship fund." The atmosphere in the room shifted as board members began scanning the documents, their expressions changing from dismissive to concerned to alarmed. Hamilton slammed his folder shut. "Where did you get these? Does it matter? They're authentic, as your faces confirm." Jessica's professional veneer cracked slightly as she reached the section detailing the scholarship manipulation. "These are internal documents. Confidential board deliberations." "Yes," I agreed. "Quite damning when exposed to light, aren't they? Particularly the pattern of rejecting qualified candidates based on ethnicity and economic background, while accepting less qualified applicants with family connections." Jonathan Harrington avoided looking at his son, whose appointment to the scholarship committee, despite his own questionable academic record, was detailed in the documents. "What exactly do you want?" Jessica asked, her voice strained. "Complete acceptance of the changes I outlined this morning. Immediate implementation of a new membership structure based on merit rather than wealth or connections. Establishment of the Public Golf Academy on the north section of the property. Transparent financial practices. Diverse leadership." "This is blackmail," Hamilton sputtered. "This is leverage," I corrected. "You've operated behind closed doors for decades, making decisions that hurt families like mine while congratulating yourselves on your stewardship. That ends today." "And if we refuse?" Jessica asked. "Then tomorrow morning, these documents will be delivered to the county tax assessor, the state attorney general's office, and several news outlets that have been investigating country club discrimination for years." I met each board member's eyes in turn. "Your choice is simple: evolution or extinction." The boardroom erupted in heated crosstalk, accusations, denials, blame shifting. I remained silent, watching the carefully constructed hierarchy fracture under pressure. Diana Harrington's quiet voice somehow cut through the chaos. "He's right." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. "Diana." Jonathan looked bewildered. "Everything in these documents is accurate," she continued steadily. "We've strayed so far from our founding principles that we've become what my grandfather despised, an enclave of privilege masquerading as merit." "You can't be serious," Hamilton said incredulously. "Completely serious." She straightened in her chair. "I move that we accept Mr. Sullivan's terms in their entirety, that we acknowledge our failures and commit to genuine reform." The stunned silence that followed was broken by an unexpected voice. "I second the motion." It was Catherine Brooks, Hamilton's wife, who rarely spoke at board meetings. Hamilton stared at her in disbelief. "Kate." She met his gaze unflinchingly. "I'm tired, Hamilton. Tired of the pretense, the exclusion, the constant defense of privileges we didn't earn. Our grandchildren deserve a better legacy than this." Jessica Chun looked around the table, calculating shifting alliances in real time. Perhaps a compromise position might be. "There is no compromise position," I interrupted firmly. "The vote is yes or no, reform or exposure, adapt or fade into irrelevance." Jonathan Harrington cleared his throat. A vote, then. All in favor of accepting Mr. Sullivan's proposal in its entirety. Diana's hand rose immediately. Catherine Brooks followed. Then, gradually, others, board members reading the writing on the wall, recognizing the inevitability of change, perhaps even feeling a flicker of relief at the chance to shed burdens of tradition they had inherited. In the end, only Hamilton Brooks, Jessica Chun, and 2 others opposed. "Motion carries," Jonathan announced, his voice devoid of emotion. "Mr. Sullivan, it appears Evergreen Heights is yours to transform as you see fit." I savored the moment briefly, then responded, "Not mine. Ours. All of ours. That's the point." As the meeting concluded and shell-shocked board members filed out, Diana lingered behind. When we were alone, except for Aisha and my legal team, she approached me. "Congratulations," she said softly. "Though that hardly seems the right word. Vindication, perhaps." "Something like that," I agreed. She glanced out the window at the golf course below, where oblivious members continued their rounds, unaware that their exclusive sanctuary had just been fundamentally altered. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked. A question I had avoided until now. The culmination of my 20-year plan had arrived, but planning for revenge and planning for reformation were entirely different matters. "Tomorrow," I said, surprised by my own certainty, "we start building something new." Have you ever witnessed a powerful institution forced to change its ways? What was the catalyst? Did the change last, or did old habits eventually return? Share your observations in the comments. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the September sun casting long shadows across the dewy grass of Evergreen Heights' famed 18th hole. By 7 a.m., a small army of workers was setting up chairs on the expansive terrace overlook, preparing for the press conference scheduled for 10 a.m. I stood at the edge of the practice green, watching the activity with mixed emotions. 20 years of single-minded focus had culminated in yesterday's victory. Yet instead of the pure satisfaction I had anticipated, I felt something more complex. Responsibility. "Quite a turnout already," Aisha observed, joining me with 2 coffee cups, handing me one. "Local news vans started arriving an hour ago. The national outlets are sending crews too." "The fall of an elitist institution makes for good television," I replied, sipping the coffee. "As does its potential resurrection." She studied me carefully. "Having second thoughts?" "Not second thoughts. Just additional thoughts." I gestured toward the clubhouse. "Tearing down is easier than building up. I've spent 20 years planning the former, not the latter." "Good thing you excel at improvisation." She smiled. "And you're not doing it alone." That much was true. Throughout the night, my phone had been flooded with messages. Former employees of the club sharing stories of mistreatment and discrimination, qualified applicants detailing their rejections, community organizations offering partnership opportunities, and most surprisingly, messages from current members expressing relief, support, even gratitude for the chance to be part of something better than what Evergreen Heights had become. Diana Harrington arrived at 8:30, dressed in simple elegance. She moved with the careful precision of someone managing pain, but her eyes were clear and determined. "The press release went out at 7, she said, without preamble. "Jessica Chun has resigned as president, effective immediately. Hamilton Brooks is threatening a separate lawsuit, but his own attorneys are advising against it." "And your husband?" A small smile curved her lips. "Jonathan is adapting. 40 years of marriage has taught him when I'm immovable on an issue. This is one of those times." She handed me a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "I wanted you to have this before the announcement." Inside was the small watercolor my father had painted, the garden scene from a gallery. "It belongs with family," she said simply. I stared at the painting, at the careful brushstrokes capturing beauty amid struggle, and felt my father's presence more strongly than I had in years. "Thank you," I managed. By 9:45, The terrace was filled beyond capacity. Club members in their customary pastels and plaids. Community leaders from neighborhoods that had never been welcome at Evergreen Heights. Reporters with cameras and microphones. Curious onlookers drawn by the commotion. At precisely 10 a.m., I took my place at the podium, flanked by Aisha, Diana, and my legal team. The crowd fell silent, expectant. "Good morning," I began, my voice carrying across the terrace and down to the 18th green below. "My name is Michael Sullivan. Some of you may remember me as the caddy who helped Jonathan Harrington win the club championship in 2001. Others know me as the founder of Sullivan Global. Today, I stand before you as the new controlling interest in Evergreen Heights Country Club." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. For nearly a century, Evergreen Heights has been a symbol of exclusivity in this county, a place where membership was determined not by merit or character, but by wealth, connections, and often by race. Today, that changes. I outlined the reforms: merit-based membership, sliding scale fees based on income, the public golf academy for underprivileged youth, diversified leadership, expanded scholarship programs. These changes aren't about destroying tradition, I continued. They're about restoring the original vision of Evergreen Heights founder Marcus Harrington, who intended this place to be a community united by the love of sport, where merit and character outweigh birthright and wealth. I gestured to Diana, who stepped forward with quiet dignity. Mrs. Diana Harrington, granddaughter of our founder, has agreed to serve as interim president during this transition period. Her institutional knowledge and commitment to reform make her uniquely qualified to guide us through this evolution. Diana spoke briefly, her voice soft but unwavering as she acknowledged past failures and committed to a more inclusive future. When she finished, a ripple of applause began, hesitant at first, then swelling as more joined in. Questions from reporters followed. Was this a personal vendetta? Partially, I admitted. Would current members be forced out? No, but they would need to embrace the new vision. Was this a publicity stunt for Sullivan Global? No, the company's involvement would remain minimal. As the formal press conference concluded, I found myself face to face with an unexpected figure, Jonathan Harrington V., looking uncomfortable in a suit that suddenly seemed too tight at the collar. "Mr. Sullivan," he said stiffly. "I wanted to, that is..." He cleared his throat. "I've been reviewing the scholarship records. From the year you applied. I didn't know that your application was ghostwritten by a family friend, while mine was rejected despite perfect scores. I finished for him. He had the grace to look ashamed. Yes, that, among other things." He hesitated, then continued with visible effort. "My grandfather, Diana's father, left funds for a special scholarship. The board repurposed it years ago for other things. I'd like to reinstate it. Name it after your parents. For students from immigrant families." I studied him, searching for insincerity and finding instead the uncomfortable awakening of a man confronting unearned privilege for the first time. "That would be appropriate," I said finally. He nodded awkwardly and moved away, stopping to speak with Diana, who listened with surprise that melted into approval. Aisha appeared at my elbow. Hamilton Brooks just rage quit his membership. Stormed out saying he'd start his own club. "Let him try," I replied. "Times have changed." As the crowd dispersed and workers began dismantling the press area, I found myself drawn to the practice green. 20 years ago, I had spent countless hours here, perfecting my stroke while wealthy members barely noticed the Filipino-Irish teenager in the white caddy uniform. I picked up a putter someone had left behind and lined up a simple shot, feeling the familiar rhythm return as if no time had passed. The ball rolled smoothly across the green and dropped into the cup with a satisfying rattle. "Still got it, I see," observed a voice behind me. I turned to find Diana watching with a faint smile. "Some things you never forget," I replied. "What will you do now?" she asked. "After the initial changes are implemented?" I looked out over the rolling expanse of Evergreen Heights, the meticulous landscaping, the carefully designed challenges of each hole, the clubhouse gleaming in the morning sun. For 20 years, this place had represented everything I resented, everything I had been denied. Now unexpectedly, it represented possibility. I said slowly, I'll finally play around. As a member. Diana's smile widened. I'd be honored to join you. While I still can. As we walked toward the first tee, I glanced back at the clubhouse, at the portrait of Marcus Harrington that hung in the entrance, at the small brass plaque bearing my father's name that would soon be installed beside it. I had come for revenge. I had achieved justice. But what I hadn't anticipated was this: renewal. For Evergreen Heights, for the community, and perhaps, finally, for myself. What institutions in your community could benefit from similar transformation? Are there exclusive spaces that should be more accessible? What would you change if you had the opportunity? Share your thoughts in the comments. Three months after the press conference at Evergreen Heights, I stood in the gleaming lobby of Singapore's Marina Bay Financial Center, waiting for the elevator to take me to the 42nd floor. The December humidity pressed against the climate-controlled environment, fogging the massive windows that showcased the city's futuristic skyline. Mr. Sullivan, they're ready for you upstairs. A young assistant approached, tablet in hand. Her name badge identified her as Lynn, from the Singapore Economic Development Board. Thank you, I replied, following her to a private elevator. The journey to this moment had been years in the making, but had accelerated dramatically after the Evergreen Heights takeover. What had begun as a personal vendetta had evolved into something far more significant, a blueprint for institutional change that had caught the attention of policymakers halfway around the world. The elevator doors opened directly into a conference room where 24 people awaited, government officials, economists, business leaders. At the head of a table sat Minister Wong, Singapore's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Economic Development. Mr. Sullivan, he greeted me, rising to shake my hand. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting on short notice. Your work with Evergreen Heights has become something of a case study for us. I took the offered seat beside him. I'm honored by your interest, Minister Wong. The transformation of an exclusive institution into an inclusive one while increasing its economic viability. This aligns perfectly with our new initiative. He gestured to his colleagues. As I mentioned in our preliminary discussions, Singapore is prepared to announce a major policy shift regarding our economic approach to leisure industries. For the next hour, Minister Wong and his team outlined their vision. Singapore would become the first nation to systematically transform its luxury sectors, golf clubs, marinas, private social clubs, into merit-based institutions open to broader participation without sacrificing quality or financial sustainability. The Sullivan Model, we're calling it, said Dr. Lim, the chief economist. Our financial projections indicate that properly implemented, this approach would increase participation by 300% while maintaining or even improving facility quality and financial returns. We've already selected 10 pilot locations, added another official, sliding a folder toward me, including the Royal Singapore Golf Club and the Sentosa Yacht Club. I flipped through the documents, noting the similarities to Evergreen Heights before its transformation. Exclusive memberships sold for millions, governance dominated by a homogeneous elite, tax advantages obtained through minimal community engagement. And my role in this? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. We would like Sullivan Global to partner with our Economic Development Board as lead consultant on this initiative, Minister Wong replied. Your expertise in both financial restructuring and institutional reform is uniquely valuable. The irony wasn't lost on me. What had begun as a personal quest for justice against a single country club had evolved into a model that could potentially transform exclusive institutions around the world. The formal announcement is scheduled for tomorrow morning, Minister Wong continued. We would be honored if you would join us for the press conference. As the meeting concluded and handshakes were exchanged, I found myself standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over Singapore's perfectly manicured landscape. My phone buzzed with a message from Aisha. How did it go? I typed back, better than expected. They're calling it the Sullivan Model. Announcing tomorrow. Her response came quickly. Your parents would be proud. Would they be? My father, who had created beauty with his hands in the gardens of the wealthy while being treated as invisible. My mother, who had cared for the county's elite in the hospital while being denied membership in their social world. Would they recognize the justice in transformation rather than destruction? My phone rang, Diana Harrington. I had kept in regular contact with her over the past months as she guided Evergreen Heights through its transition. Her health had declined, but her determination hadn't wavered. I just saw the news alert, she said without preamble. Singapore adopting your model. Congratulations. News travels fast, I replied, surprised that the announcement had leaked already. I have my sources, she said, a smile in her voice. How does it feel, knowing your idea will impact institutions worldwide? I considered the question. Unexpected. This was never the plan. The best legacies rarely are, she observed. We just received the latest membership figures, by the way. Applications up 400% since the reforms. Revenue increased despite the sliding scale fees. The Public Golf Academy has a waiting list through next summer. And the old guard? Some left, as expected. Hamilton Brooks is still trying to gather support for his new club, without much success. But most stayed, and more surprisingly, many are actively engaging with the new programs. Jonathan is teaching classes at the academy twice a week. Even Jessica Chun has rejoined the board, bringing valuable financial expertise to the scholarship endowment. I hadn't expected that. People can change. Some can. When given the right motivation and opportunity. A pause then. The doctors say I have about a month left. I've updated my will. Left most of my shares in the club to the Scholarship Foundation. But I've designated you as my proxy for voting rights. The news hit harder than I expected. Despite our complicated history, Diana had become something like a mentor in recent months, her insider knowledge proving invaluable to Evergreen Heights transformation. Diana. No condolences necessary, she interrupted gently. I've made my peace. My grandfather's vision is being fulfilled. That's enough. After we said our goodbyes, I remained at the window, watching Singapore's efficient rhythms unfold below. Tomorrow's announcement would mark the beginning of a new chapter, not just for me, but potentially for exclusive institutions around the world. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Lena Washington, who had become the legal director for Evergreen Heights Transformation. The Sullivan Model going international. Not bad for a rejected scholarship applicant. I smiled at that. Not bad indeed. As I prepared to leave for my hotel, Minister Wong approached with a final question. The foreign announcement tomorrow. It will certainly impact similar institutions globally. Do you think they'll resist or adapt? I thought of Evergreen Heights, of the initial resistance, followed by acceptance, and finally engagement. Of Hamilton Brooks, still fighting a battle that had already been lost. Of Jessica Chun, who had returned to lend her expertise to a transformed institution. Some will resist, I replied. But the smart ones will recognize this isn't about destruction. It's about evolution. About creating something better than what came before. He nodded thoughtfully. And you? What comes next for Michael Sullivan? You've achieved your revenge, created a model for change. What will drive you now? The question echoed one that had haunted me since the Evergreen Heights takeover. For 20 years, revenge had been my compass, justice my destination. Now that I had arrived, what would guide me forward? Not revenge, I said finally. Creation. Building something that truly reflects merit and character over birthright and wealth, not just at Evergreen Heights, but wherever these institutions exist. As I left the Marina Bay Financial Center and stepped into the humid Singapore evening, I felt a weight lift that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. The chip on my shoulder that had driven me for 2 decades had served its purpose, but now it was time to set it down. Tomorrow's announcement wouldn't just change exclusive institutions around the world. It would complete my own transformation from a man defined by what he had been denied to one defined by what he could create. 20 years ago, I had walked out of Evergreen Heights vowing revenge. Today, I walked into a future focused not on settling old scores, but on building new possibilities. I had gotten it all back and discovered that all was more than I had initially imagined. What institutions or systems have you seen transform in your lifetime? Was the change driven from within or by external pressure? Do you believe exclusive spaces can truly become inclusive while maintaining their quality? Share your perspective in the comments. Five years later, the morning mist clung to Evergreen Heights' rolling landscape as I made my way to the first tee. Dawn was just breaking, casting long shadows across the dewy grass, my favorite time to play, before the course filled with members. "Morning, Mr. Sullivan," called the groundskeeper, a young woman who had come through our scholarship program and was now studying landscape architecture while working part-time at the club. "Morning, Zoe. Course looking good today. Thanks. We just finished the new native plant installations around the 14th. You should check them out." I promised I would and continued to the clubhouse, where early risers were already gathering for breakfast. The building had changed significantly over the past 5 years. The stuffy oil paintings replaced with works by local artists, the dark wood paneling lightened, the spaces redesigned to be more welcoming, more accessible. The membership had changed too. While some familiar faces remained, the Harringtons, the Chens, a handful of others who had embraced the new vision, they were now outnumbered by newer members who had joined under the merit-based system. Doctors, teachers, small business owners, people who loved the game and contributed to the community, but would never have qualified under the old regime of wealth and connections. Diana hadn't lived to see most of these changes. She had passed peacefully 4 years ago, but not before establishing the Harrington-Sullivan Foundation, which now administered the club's expanded scholarship programs and community initiatives. In the pro shop, I found Jonathan Harrington organizing equipment for the youth clinic he ran every Saturday morning. He had undergone perhaps the most surprising transformation of all, from entitled heir to dedicated community builder, channeling his family resources into expanding access to the sport he loved. "Michael," he greeted me with a genuine smile that still occasionally surprised me. "Early round today. Meeting a special guest?" I replied. "Thought I'd show him the course beforehand." "Ah, the Singapore delegation. I heard they were visiting again. The Sullivan Model, going strong. Stronger than expected." In the 5 years since Singapore's adoption of what they had dubbed the Sullivan Model, similar initiatives had spread to exclusive institutions in 12 countries. Sullivan Global now had a dedicated division focused solely on helping private clubs transition to merit-based systems while maintaining financial viability. As I stepped onto the practice green, I spotted a familiar figure already there, Jessie Chun, Jessica's daughter, who had returned from college to join the family business and now served as Evergreen Heights finance director. She was demonstrating putting techniques to a group of elementary school children from the county's lowest income district. "Remember, it's all about feel," she was saying as I passed. "Don't overthink it. Good advice for golf. Better advice for life." My phone buzzed with a text from Aisha. "Minister Wong's car just cleared the gate. ETA 10 minutes. I made my way to the entrance to greet our visitor. Minister Wong, now Singapore's Prime Minister, had specifically requested this tour during his brief U.S. visit. 5 years after implementing the Sullivan Model across Singapore's leisure sectors, he wanted to see where it had all begun. "Mr. Sullivan," he called as he emerged from his vehicle, extending his hand. "A pleasure to see you again." "The pleasure is mine, Prime Minister. Welcome to Evergreen Heights." As we walked the grounds, I pointed out the changes: the public academy, where local schools now held physical education classes, the expanded clubhouse that hosted community events, the memorial garden dedicated to Diana Harrington. "Remarkable transformation," he observed. The reports showed the numbers, but seeing it firsthand. He gestured to a group of teenage girls receiving golf instruction from a professional, a diverse group that would have been unimaginable in the old Evergreen Heights. "This is what success looks like. We paused at the 14th hole, where the morning sun now illuminated the new native plant installations Zoe had mentioned earlier. The once manicured rough had given way to a vibrant stretch of wildflowers and tall grasses, a nod to the club's commitment to sustainability. It was a small but symbolic shift, one of many. Minister Wong took the scene, nodding in approval. Inclusivity, sustainability, community engagement, all within a framework that remains financially viable. He turned to me. Michael, your model isn't just reforming institutions. It's redefining what they stand for. I let his words settle. 5 years ago, none of this had seemed possible. The battles, the resistance, the slow, painstaking work of unlearning decades of exclusivity. There were times I'd wondered if it was worth it. But as I looked around, at the faces of children learning a sport once reserved for the elite, at Jonathan mentoring young players, at Jesse balancing the books to ensure we could keep growing, there was no doubt. A gust of wind carried the scent of fresh-cut grass, and for a fleeting moment, I thought of Diana. She had believed in this place before I did. In a way, we were just carrying out her vision. Minister Wong exhaled, as if making a decision. We're expanding the program, he said. Not just in golf clubs, but in other traditionally exclusive institutions, country clubs, yacht clubs, even certain academic societies. We'd like Sullivan Global's help in making it happen. I smiled. I think we can make that work. As we shook hands, I caught sight of Zoe in the distance, inspecting the landscape she had helped design. Jesse was laughing with the kids on the practice green. Jonathan was leading the youth clinic with an ease that would have been unthinkable in his past life. Evergreen Heights had come full circle. And maybe, just maybe, so had I.